In 2022, Eddie Jones picked up the phone. He had a target, a 20-year-old, largely unknown outside South African club rugby, but Jones had done his homework, and he'd found something that most people hadn't noticed yet: a British passport. The boy's father was born in London. That made the son legally eligible for England. No loopholes, no gray areas. A clean, legitimate path straight into the white jersey. Jones made his case. He laid it all out. And here's where the story starts, because the 20-year-old didn't hesitate. He didn't ask for time to think. He didn't say, "Let me weigh my options." He said no, just like that. His name is Sasha Feinberg Mngame, and what he did next, what he went on to build after that phone call, is one of the most remarkable stories in world rugby right now. But before we get to the records, the hat-tricks, the history he rewrote at 23 years old, you need to understand who this person actually is, because it changes everything. His grandfather, Barry Feinberg, was a poet, an author, and an anti-apartheid activist, a member of the African National Congress, and because of that, he was forced out of South Africa, exiled. His son Nick was born in London not by choice, but because the country his father loved wouldn't let him stay. Nick eventually came home, built a life in Cape Town as a radio presenter and journalist, and raised a son who carries both worlds in his name. Feinberg, from a Jewish South African family that had to leave; Mngame Zulu, from his mother Makosazana, a Zulu lawyer. Two continents, two cultures, one family story that cuts right through the most painful chapter in South African history. Now, here's what makes the England call even more loaded than it first appears. Sasha had already been to the Northern Hemisphere. As a teenager, he spent 3 months as an exchange student at Llandovery College in Wales. He trained there, he played there, he breathed that rugby air. He came home anyway, and when English clubs came calling after school, not just Jones, but clubs offering full pathways into the England under-20 setup, he turned every single one of them down. His own words, "I had the opportunity to go abroad straight after school from several clubs. That would have meant me going into the England under-20 setup, which is what I didn't want." Now, you might be thinking, okay, a young player backs his home nation. That happens. It's admirable, but it's not unusual. Here's what is unusual. Here's what Rassi Erasmus said when journalists brought it up. "I don't really care what Eddie has to say about it. It's about what Sasha says." Think about that for a second. The Springbok head coach in a public media briefing telling the world's press that he trusted a 20-year-old before a single test cap, before any of it, to make his own call. No pressure, no recruitment speech, no "you owe us." Just, "We've built something worth choosing. Let him decide." Sasha decided, and what he went on to do with that decision, nobody saw this coming. Not at this speed, not at this scale. His test debut came in June 2024 against Wales, the same country where he spent 3 months as a schoolboy. He came off the bench, contributed a penalty, 2 conversions, solid, measured, nothing that made the rugby world stop and take notice, which is exactly why what happened next was so hard to process. In 2025, he started 8 of his 11 tests for the back-to-back world champions. He scored 6 tries in the 4-test November window alone. 4 different opponents, 4 different defenses, all trying to find an answer, none of them finding one. But those weren't even the number that stopped everyone cold. That came in September 2025, home soil, Argentina. Percy Montgomery, 3 World Cups, one of the most celebrated South Africans to pull on a green jersey. In 2007, he set the record for most points by a South African in a single test match, 35 points against Namibia. It had stood for nearly 2 decades, the kind of record that starts to feel permanent. Sasha Feinberg Mngame broke it at 23 years old, 37 points, 1 afternoon, 3 tries, 8 conversions, 2 penalties. But it's not just the number, it's how the 3rd try happened. A 360-degree dummy, a step through 3 defenders, in a test match, wearing the number 10 jersey for the world champions. pause on that for a second, because the Springbok 10 has never been that. Andre Pollard was the archetype of what that jersey means: calm, territorial, precise. 2 World Cup medals, the man you want over the ball when everything is on the line. Morné Steyn is still remembered for a single penalty kick in 2009 that broke the Lions' hearts. The Springbok 10 controls the game. That's the job. That's always been the job. Sasha does all of that. And then he scores hat tricks. When your fly half is a genuine finishing threat, defenses can't just track the runners outside him. They have to track him too. That is a problem South Africa has never previously posed from position 10, and opposing coaches are only just starting to figure out what to do about it. By the end of 2025, World Rugby Dream Team, URC Player of the Year, most tries ever scored by a Springbok fly half, records that Steyn and Pollard needed entire careers to set, broken in fewer tests than either of them needed. 23 years old. You'd think at this point the story is simple: generational talent on a one-way rocket ship to the top. But then 2026 arrived, and something that nobody was expecting. His form dipped. Not a crisis, but visible enough that it couldn't be ignored. The Stormers had a rough run, and Sasha was trying to carry more than any one player can carry. Springbok attack coach Tony Brown addressed it directly in a media briefing. He's probably trying to do too much by himself. If I have to say something to him, it would be, use the players around you more. Don't always try to take everyone on yourself. Here's the thing about that observation. It tells you more about Sasha Feinberg Mngame than any of the records do. What Brown is describing is a player who, when the team around him is struggling, instinctively tries to solve a collective problem alone. That doesn't happen to ordinary players. It happens to the ones who care too much to accept losing. Brown's follow-up said the other half. In the Springbok environment, the way we train, the way we play, he fits in and it's easy for him. The club dip is temporary. The test arena is where Sasha operates at his natural level, and the timing of what's coming next makes that more significant than it might seem. 13 confirmed tests for South Africa, including a Nations Championship opener against England at Ellis Park, July 4th. England, the country that spent months in 2022 trying to recruit Feinberg into their setup, walking into one of South Africa's most charged test venues, potentially facing the exact player they failed to get. By the time he walks out at Ellis Park, he'll be 24 and among the most dangerous fly halves on the planet. And here's what he said when people started talking about his trajectory, after the records, after the Dream Team, after all of it. The rise has been steep, but it cannot keep going at the same pace forever. It's not always going to be this Elon Musk rocket ship. He was 23, he'd just rewritten history, and he was already telling people, the dips will come. My job is to stay level through both. That's not media management. That's a person who has been making clear-eyed, long-term decisions since he was old enough to answer Eddie Jones's phone call. No team in history has ever won 3 consecutive World Cups. The Springboks are going to try. Australia 2027 is the stage. And if Sasha Feinberg Mngame stays fit, holds his form across 13 tests, and keeps doing what he's been doing since June 2024, he is the strong favorite to be the fly half they take into that attempt. So here's the question, the one worth actually sitting with. Does he need a World Cup winner's medal before you put him in the conversation with the greatest Springbok fly halves of all time? Or are the records already enough to start that argument right now? South Africa knew what they had. Sasha knew where he belonged. The rest of us are just catching up.